Hey everybody, this is Jake from P3 and I am very excited to bring you our very first Hyundai gauge. This video is all about the install procedure for the second gen Veloster. Just like with all our install procedures, the first thing we want you to check is to make sure the gauge functions on your car before you take the dash apart. That way, if there's any problems, you save yourself a big hassle. Each gauge is going to consist of three major components. First being the display with or without an OEM vent, depending on if you selected that option from us or not. You've got your control box, and then you've got your OBD2 harness. So what we want to do is just assemble this really quick. The OBD2 harness plugs into one side of the control box, and then the display plugs into the other side. And then we're going to simply just plug this into the OBD2 port, and when we do, we might see some flashing dots on the screen. That means the gauge is trying to pair to the network. So we can see that there. Go ahead and start your engine and the gauge should turn on with the engine. Right there, we're already looking at vacuum. We can jump over to another reading, just make sure we have good data on the network. Got RPM. And we're good to go. So we can go ahead and start this install. Let me set this aside for now. And the only tools you should need for this install procedure are just a Phillips screwdriver or like a little drill driver like this, and then a trusty trim pry tool. First thing we're gonna do is remove this side trim, which is rather stiff, so it might be a little hard to get it started, but they got this notch down in here that you can get it, wiggle under. Just work your way around. I think there's like 4 snap fittings on this. And we can just rotate that out from under your weather strip and then set that aside. And now we're going to remove these 4 Phillips screws. Once you have the screws removed, we can go ahead and release these 2 tabs. And basically they're locked in this way against the side of the dash frame. So we just need to use our trim tool to pop them loose, and you can see it's already dropping down there. Now we just have the rest of the clips up in here, so just go ahead and pull straight back toward you. And then that is loose, and we can let that just hang down. That's plenty of room to get the next piece out, which is going to be this trim. Same thing, we have these side clips here that kind of lock onto the side of the frame. Go ahead and work those loose. There's 2, and then kind of pull toward you. These do have a pretty positive grip, so you do kind of have to tug on it a little bit to get them loose, but you're not going to break anything. There we go, and then that can also just set like this. That's going to bring us to our vent being exposed, and we do have 1 Phillips screw here that we need to remove. And then now, part of this vent on this side underlaps this bezel around the cluster, so we do need to release this. We can pull straight out on the bottom and straight out on the back. It is rather tight, so you're going to have to fight it a little bit. There she comes. There we go. And we don't even have to remove it all the way. We just have to get it loose like that. And then the last piece that's going to keep us from fully removing this vent is this side trim, which is really tight on all these gaps. And I couldn't really get a trim tool in here. So the thing I like to do is just go ahead and pull out on the vent, and it's going to help give you a gap here to get that off. So we can see there, actually it just released for me there. But basically that just snaps into place. It's going to snap forward and then snap in. And these 2 tabs here engage these slots on the vent, so it can't come out unless you remove that. At this point, we're ready to take our vent over to the work table and put the display in place of these bottom 2 slats. All right, we're at the workbench. We have everything laid out that we need. The only tools you'll need for this part are a small screwdriver just to pry some pieces apart. Again, a Phillips screwdriver or a little drill driver. And then I like to use these snips. They have a fine edge that helps separating the parts. You don't actually have to cut anything or break anything, but just using these to help separate pieces that are tightly snapped together, sometimes it helps. First thing we want to do on this vent is remove this top screw, and then you have 3 screws around the back. So 4 screws in total, they're all Phillips. Go ahead and just take those out. This top one is really tiny, and then the other 3 are the same, so you won't have any problems mixing them up. Once you get those off, we do have this one little lock tab here on the top, so go ahead and release that, and when you do, the trim should come right off the face of the vent, like that. So So we can set this aside. All right, so now we have this whole horizontal vent slat assembly. And we can just use our pocket screwdriver here, kind of just release either side of it. Work that side free, and then the whole assembly should kind of roll out of the vent together as one piece. Now we can set this aside. So now these can come apart just like you see there, and we only need to remove the bottom 2 slats. So go ahead and do that. You can just slide them out of place. And these are actually coming apart pretty easy. But on the ones over here that are a little tighter, I like to take the snips and not actually cut, but just use the wedge shape of the snips to kind of just pop them off like that. Another nice note is you probably can't see this on camera, but if you, let's say these all fall apart on you and you don't know what to do, starting from the bottom, they have little nubs on them, little bumps. So this one has 1, the second one has 2, the third one has 3, and the top one has 4. So then you have 1, 2, 3, 4, bottom to top. If it falls apart or explodes on you, then you'll know how to put it back together, kind of like that. We can set these aside. If you're leasing or renting your car or anything like that, you might want to keep these, and then you can just put your vent back to stock when you're done. So now I want to put these sidebar things back on, and once those are in place, we can now bring our display into the mix. And the display is just literally taking the place of those bottom 2 slats. So we do have 2 small pegs over here and 2 small pegs over here that are going to go in the empty holes on these side brackets. So go ahead and work that in. Just start on one side, get that fitted, and then kind of work the other side in. Okay, we've got all those together, so I can set that down carefully and it should stay in place. Now we want to feed the display cable through the far left portion of the vent, and we want the pink side of the cable to be down. We'll feed that through. You might have to push it through. We're gonna pull that right through the back and all the way through. Make sure this cable doesn't get twisted up or anything. It is rather strong, but if it gets twisted, that's when you can run into problems. And then also, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but we do have this fork here that does your side-to-side motion. We need to make sure it correctly seats on that shaft in the back there, so I can see it even if you can't. Make sure that's correct. And now that that is seated properly, we'll go ahead and snap the 2 sides in, and then we can verify that it's moving correctly, just like that. Now we can come around the back of the vent. And in most cases, you can just fold this cable right around the foam. I've actually already installed this in the car for testing already, so you can see I made a little relief cut here. And again, this is completely optional, but we like to do this when we pre-install them. And then I'm actually going to route this cable underneath the foam. Again, you don't have to do this part, you can just pinch it right on top of the foam, but since I've already made this, I'm gonna do that. And then I actually like to take a little dab of hot glue on either side, just clean it up a little bit, make sure it's nice and tidy for you guys when you get them pre-installed. Pinch that together, maybe put a little dot of glue under the foam. Then we've got that right in place. Now we're ready to put our trim back on. All you do is kind of figure out, that's obviously backwards, just figure out which way it goes, and then it'll snap into place partially. And one thing that's a little difficult on these, this little peg here, you gotta make sure it kind of gets over into the groove like that, and when it does, then it will fully clip down. And then we want to put our 3 larger screws back in place on the back side. Go ahead and tighten those down, and we'll get our little guy in place on top. And there we have it. Now we can make sure that our side-to-side works good, and you do have some up and down still there. Just make sure everything's routed correctly, either pinched on top of the foam or underneath. And now this is ready to go back in your dash. All right, we're back at the car with our display completely installed in the vent, ready to pop back in. And putting this back together is obviously going to be pretty much the reverse of taking it apart, with the addition of routing a few cables. So what we want to do is just drop our display cable straight down through the bottom, and this is about as open as it gets under the dash in this area, so that is pretty sweet. Should make it nice and easy. And then we want to make sure that this cable is not super twisted up. We just want it to fold and go back in the plenum. So right now it's correctly set. And then we need to make sure this side of our vent trim is underneath the bezel for the cluster, and then this side needs to be underneath this trim. So just make sure you aren't trying to force it on top of either of those. We'll get this in place. Make sure our slack gets pulled through as well. So we got that snapped in place, and then right now we can snap this side trim in. Goes real easy. And then this bezel has a couple large tabs all the way up at the front. Just need to make sure those get seated down and they kind of guide everything else in. They're longer than all the other locking tabs. So if you don't get those set first, you'll be pushing and it'll try to go on top of the dash instead of snapping in place. So it feels like we're good here. Snap her in, like that. Nice positive fit. And now before we forget, we want to run our 1 Phillips screw back in for the vent. Now we can take our control box and OBD2 harness, which are already plugged into each other, plug that into the control box. And while this is so open, I'm gonna go ahead and just plug this in because I can literally see everything. And when we do this, you again may see some dots on the screen of your gauge like that. And then I can literally see everything in here. So I'm just gonna go ahead and tuck all the wiring up inside here for the sake of keeping this video short. Obviously you can wrap that all up and zip tie it and felt it and all that stuff, but we're constantly taking these in and out of our own cars, and I just kind of wedge it in there because I know it's going to come back out soon. Never had a problem with a rattle so far, but again, everybody can do that exactly how they want. Now we can take this trim here, snap it back in place, but it's upside down. Probably want to try to put that the right way. We'll get that lined up. Snaps all back in place. And then we'll do our bottom as well, making sure that none of the cables get stuck out the side here. That's all good. And now we have our 4 Phillips screws to put back in those side trims. Now we just need to get our side trim installed back in place, and it has this lip running down the whole length of the outer edge, and that's gonna have to underlap and go underneath this weather stripping. So an easy way to do that is to place it kind of like this and then roll that lip underneath the weather stripping all in one motion. And if you can get the angle right, it should go right back into place like that. Snap everything into place, and that wraps this install up. Let's go ahead and start our engine, get the gauge to turn on. We've got RPM there working properly, so we are good to go. We can just do the ever so satisfying peel of that cover. Got a little guy right there. But yeah, now you can cycle through your settings and see all the readings. Everything's good to go. That completely wraps this install up. Hopefully this video helps make your install a breeze. And if you like it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, tell some friends about P3. We're a small business. Word of mouth and social media really helps us out a ton. If you like videos like this, be sure to check out our channel. We've got lots of other content, both for entertainment and education on our products, but we really appreciate you watching. Thanks, guys.